right, while we work through the audio, let me just give you a little background in terms of my experience. So I'm a thought leader in the wearables and IoT space, IoT. Technology and Society magazine. And also speak at conferences and leading forums. All right. So in terms of my background, I have about 18 years of strategy and full end-to-end. I have to just take this off. Apologize. Okay, can everybody hear me? I think this is a small enough intimate environment so we can hear each other. Okay, so what that means is basically I actually manage double-digit million-dollar engagements across multiple verticals. So these are fairly large implementation that involve the entire enterprise. And in my last corporate position, I was the VP of product management at a financial services technology company, which I helped to position and then to sell to a Fortune 500 publicly traded company. I've also started a number of startups, one of which I actually successfully sold. So a little bit about my experience. In terms of my education, I have my master's degree from the University of Chicago in applied microeconomics and public policy. And I was a national Woodrow Wilson Sloan Fellow from Carnegie Mellon University and completing my strategy certificate from UCLA. So a little bit about myself. Okay, so let's talk about wearables. And I want to just distinguish between wearables versus Internet of Things. I think most of you are pretty much aware of. Okay, let's just take a pause here. Okay. Sure. Okay, all right, much better. Excellent. All right, so what are wearables? Wearables are miniaturized computer devices that are either on you, inside of you, or on your clothing. And it's really important to note that not all wearables are necessarily smart computing devices. And as we know, some of them are sensor-laden devices that really don't have that embedded processor that has intelligence, the ability to be able to process things. And furthermore, not all wearables necessarily are truly internet ready or enabled. So they actually have to function through essentially a gateway through such as your smartphone, through something like a Bluetooth, for example. All right, so what I'm hoping to achieve in this short presentation is to help you to at least start to think about what are some possible frameworks or methodologies that can be used to systematically think about, how do we identify what those business opportunities may be. And we'll start with the wearables and then we'll transition over to Internet of Things. Now, here's a proven methodology based on product development and management association's new product development process. Now, for this talk, we'll focus on stages 1 and 2, which are the ideal generation as well as the ideal screening phases. In the first stage of ideal generation, which is really the brainstorming stage, right? This is where you start to conceptualize, different types of products, services that could potentially take advantage of the various capabilities of wearables. And here, this is really critical where it's all about creativity. You don't want to be constrained, at least this early. So it's all about idea creation, and there's no bad ideas, at least at this point. And it makes me think about some of the things that my kids go through. My daughter was involved in a competition. It's a group competition where they actually have to figure out problem solving. So they're given a book, a hardbound book, and some large rubber bands. And they're asked to basically put as many balls on the book as possible within a certain time frame. Well, she and her teammates naturally think in a very linear fashion, start to stack the balls. And of course, what happens when you stack balls on top of a textbook? It starts to roll off, right? So Mackenzie, my daughter, says, can you tear or can you open the book? They said, you can't tear, but you can definitely open the book. So she opens the book. She puts a rubber band kind of around the book that's half open. making kind of a parameter, and then she starts stuffing the balls on top of it. So that's an example. Another example we tend to do from creative solving is ask questions. So I'll say, Mackenzie or Christian, take a look at this page. How do you get rid of this sum that's on this page? Well, you may be thinking, well, why don't we could erase it? You could rip it. I said, well, you can't do any of that. So what can you do? Mackenzie says, well, flip the page. So there's so many ways for us to think about how we look at a problem. And it's really about that creativity. So all of you are analytical in nature, and the great thing about this is it's actually a learned skill. So all of us are actually on the same wavelength. Stage 2 of ideal screening. Now, so you've generated a long list of potential ideal candidates. Great. Well, now we've got to take that and apply it against a formal set of criteria. It's because you need to be able to rationalize, does this make sense? And I mean, what is the potential growth of this market? What is the competitive landscape currently, and how could that potentially change? And is this even economically viable or technically feasible for that matter? So this is where you start to apply filters. I'm just going to pause here for just a second to say something, which is some of you, and again, I'm in my 40s, so I've gone through a bit of experience, but when I used to be in my 20s, I used to be fairly idealistic. You think, I came up with this incredibly beautiful idea, right? Pure idealism. Thinking that this is flawless. I examined it from every possible angle, and it's error-free. But the reality is, when you go through this process, you realize that that idea that you basically came up with, that you just dearly love, it's going to morph. It has to morph. It's going to change by just the nature of going through the methodology. Let me give you one more example. When I used to do startups, we used to say in Silicon Valley that when you ask for funding from VCs or angel investors, you're not actually getting funded for the idea. You're actually getting funded for iteration. In other words, the people that's funding you already know you're going to make mistakes. If you don't make mistakes, you're probably not challenging your thesis or your hypothesis. So you're getting funded to do iteration 1, failure, correction, iteration 2, failure, correction, iteration 3, something like that. That's where Twitter comes along. What was Twitter? It was an internal communication tool. What was PayPal? They started out as a encryption or data security. And they just happened to sit around and say, well, what do we do? Got a lot of money that we're just burning through. And then, so a lot of these companies really rarely ever actually start out as who we think they are. They actually start out through a series of iterations. All right. Now, I'm not going to cover the rest of the process, but what I'm going to say is that at each stage or each gate, you have to validate and prove out based on the information that's available at that point, the business justification to proceed and move the project forward. Right? Now, I'm going to just pause here and ask the question, based on this framework, do you feel like you have all the tools you need to explore all the possibilities in wearables and IoT? Probably not. You probably need more. So this is where we continue to layer on additional aspects. So there's 3 vectors that we can think about. One is a really important piece of it, which is right here, the wearable characteristics. And I can't emphasize this enough. I know most of you can probably just rattle off on the tip of your tongue in terms of the different characteristics, but this is where you need to really ruminate on each of those features, each of those benefits, each of those characteristics, those capabilities, because when you do so, you'll be surprised at the epiphanies or the insights you'll gain. And then you overlay with a specific sector, and then a use case or a problem within that sector. When these 3 dimensions come together, you start to crystallize a potential business opportunity that you can pursue. All right, so what makes wearables wearables? Well, let's talk about benefits first. This is by no means an exhaustive list of all the benefits that wearables have to provide, but certainly it's a good starting list. Right? So first is the fact that it's hands-free. Well, what does that mean? Right? It means that the wearer can actually do multitasking. And the fact that you're hands-free, what are the possible things that you could do as a result of being hands-free? Imagine a chef at a busy restaurant, chopping away. Can that person really look up a smartphone to check his recipe or ingredients? Or a scuba diver that's deep in the ocean? Or perhaps a mom that's pushing the stroller with a diaper bag? you really have to think about these scenarios. So really, there's so many opportunities if you ask the right sets of questions. Same thing with continuous and consistent. One of the things that makes Wearables so unique that's different from smartphones is the fact that it's on us, in us. It's continuously, consistently monitoring our body. Okay? And that's a very powerful thing because it starts to profile your emotional state, your physical state, and even your movement. Okay? So what are all the potential use cases that could benefit from the fact of how you're feeling, how you're reacting, how you're moving? So we're just starting to see this tip of the iceberg in live concert venues. There was an article that just came out just recently around that. There's so many opportunities. So ask the right questions and think about what those means to you. Immediate access to information. All right, we love this. We love Google now. We love the fact that we have all that information within seconds. But it's not enough the fact that you can search it on your smartphone. It's the context of how do you use it when you're wearing something? How do you use it when you have a sense of urgency? So let me give you a few scenarios. Let's say you have your luggages, you have your laptop bag, and you're trying to make to your next flight. Can you really take out your smartphone and try and figure out the next gate? Well, we do that anyways because we have no choice at this point. But, you know, imagine if it just augmented right in front of you, and it's giving you directions. Make a left, make a right, go to gate 2. Right? Or possibly you're having dinner with somebody, and that person goes into a convulsion-like seizure. What do? I mean, besides calling 119, emergency services, is there anything that you can do at that point? So it's this notion of sense of urgency and type of information that's needed in a particular scenario. Next is effortless authentication. Your wearable device is a very powerful tool if used properly. So what are the possible logical and physical and health and financial ways that we can frictionlessly access information? So think about, we hear a lot about payments and so forth, but imagine, right now the reality is, logically, when we actually have to create passwords on different sites, we are either using the same password, which is unfortunate, or we're using a similar pattern that can be easily hacked. Offline, we have to bother with the fact that we have to take out our card to access, office security or university security. We have to take out a Metro card to go through our gates, or to whip out our credit card from our wallet to make payments for purchases. These cause friction. These are all friction points. So how can wearables potentially minimize these frictions? And we're starting to see many examples and applications of this. So Sony's Felica network, for example, is starting to address a lot of these contactless payments as well as access issues. Contextual. Contextual is probably one of the most important aspects about wearables. I'm going to give you a story from Stephen Covey. He talks about a man who's in a train, and this man is really bothered because there's these 2 kids in the train that's making a lot of noise, they're running around, and frankly, they're just disturbing the heck out of everybody. And then he sees that the father of the kids is sitting over here, isn't doing much about those kids. And so finally he gets so fed up, he says to the father of the kids, "Can't you do something like your kids?" The father responds gently by saying, their mother just passed away at the hospital. My wife just died. So the context immediately shifts from that of irritation to that of sympathy, more of how can I help, for instance. So wearables is exactly about understanding context. What are you doing? What were you doing before this? What are you looking to achieve now? How are you moving? How are you feeling? And all this information can start to help you understand that, and as a result, be able to provide information to you when you need it. In one of my Wired articles, I talk about the fact that in the future, wearable apps will become much more predictive, proactive, present, always listening and making sense of what you're doing, and then providing just that right piece of information at the right time when you need it the most. Okay, capabilities of wearables. Sensory integration. All of us want to be Superman at some point, right? Imagine wearables can actually enhance our ability to see, hear, touch, even our strength. So there's an ability to be able to take optical character recognition, convert text into audible reading, so that somebody who's blind can actually appreciate the reading without having to use Braille, for instance. Or the fact that a warehouse worker or a soldier could put on an exoskeletal suit to magnify his strength, right? Whether it's to pick up things or to maybe perhaps get into combat mode. I'm going to skip data collection because we'll get into that in the next slide. Augmented reality. We hear a lot about augmented reality, virtual reality in the gaming context. Right? But have we ever thought about augmented reality for productivity? When you do your PhD work, when you do your research work, or when you're working on your MBA program, what are you using? Are you using your phone? Are you using your tablets? You're probably using your PCs, right? Well, what if I said augmented reality could potentially free of all this? We always talk about the fact that smartwatch form factor is so small, I can't do any work. Well, because they're thinking in a linear fashion. What if augmented reality could allow for you to have a huge vertical, horizontal field of view in the ambient air, so I could do my word processing, so I could do my PowerPoint, so I could do my research, play games, watch entertainment, do social media. Now, it has to be something in between Google Glass, which is way too small, and less than Oculus Rift, because we certainly don't want to wear these things that completely cover our eyes and bump into things. Now, that's a little ridiculous. So something in between that can really free us. So again, AR, we're just starting to scratch the surface. Communication. With things like GoPro, Google Glass, we're just starting to see a few examples of how ability to record video, ability to take photos, talk, listen, share, hands-free is starting to come into play. But I can assure you that this is a huge, huge opportunity. Huge opportunity. I mean, and we're starting to see even holographic things. So imagine, a lot of things that we take for granted, just kind of from a fantasy with Star Trek or Star Wars for that matter, all of these things could potentially come true. Right? Where communication could take form in the holographic fashion, 3D fashion. Using wearables as a controller, log bar ring, fin, these are gesture control rings that convert your finger into a controller. I can use it to control my PowerPoint. I can use it to control my TV. Or gaming, for instance. So what are all the possible ways that you could turn a wearable into a controller? And we all know, and we probably heard that smartwatches is kind of expected to become that central controller for Internet of Things within our house, around our house, or interacting with our cars, for instance. So again, there's so many opportunities, but you have to ask the right questions. All right, types of data. Love this slide. Get really excited, because ultimately, at the end of the day, what is the world about? Wearables are about the data. What are you collecting? You're collecting your heartbeats, your heart rate variability, your blood oxygen level, your blood pressure, blood glucose level, your temperature, electrodermal, EEG. I mean, it just goes on. The type of biometric and information that can be gathered through this, huge. And what that means, you can start to, like I said, identify what the emotional state or the physical state or the movement of that person is. Now I'll show you in a few examples how you can actually start to apply some of these things. Movement. All right, the way we move when we're walking through metro versus when we're at a dance floor, and I'm not a very good dancer, or when we're sitting or when we're lying down, all tells you different things. Your accelerometer, your gyroscope, all of these will convey different types of data points. But they are going to actually, in aggregate, start to give you a picture of what are you doing? What type of activity are you pursuing? And what's the physical response? Now, we're starting to see some of this kind of application in the case of fitness and sports, where they're trying to measure your reps and sets at a gym, or perhaps your golf swing or your tennis swing, or the segments of your cycling and running. But I'm telling you, there's so many ways we can slice and dice this. I mean, the opportunities are endless. And then geolocation, events, and transaction. Well, the way you want to think about this is it's almost like a cookie for the physical realm. I mean, it literally tracks what you've done, where you've been, what you purchased. So taking all that information, historical as well as current, imagine your understanding of the context and how you could potentially proactively make recommendation or advise that person that where in terms of what would be most valuable at the point in time. Okay, applications. Some of these I've already covered to some extent, and this is certainly not an exhaustive list by any means, but think about the ways we can apply wearables. We can monitor, we can optimize, we can automate, we can mitigate risk, and we can centralize communication. So monitor. I'll give you an example. Like I said, I'm in my 40s. I don't look it. But when I was younger, probably your age, I used to have a hot temper. And maybe that's just because I'm of Korean descent. But it took a while before I hit that boiling point. But when I hit that boiling point, boy, everything just turned red. Right? But imagine biometric detection can actually detect your rise in stress, your heartbeat. So way before you hit that boiling point, it starts to tell you to back off, breathe a little bit, take a walk, remove yourself from that situation. Right? Because we know when we get angry, typically the decisions we make are much, much inferior because our IQs are temporarily lower at that point. Optimization. You may be thinking, well, you're probably thinking performance around sports and fitness and health, sure. But have you thought about optimization applied to worker productivity? I'll give you an example. Years ago, I had a boss who measured productivity based on the number of hours you sat in front of a computer. So if you work 10 to 12 hours in front of the computer, you must be very productive. Well, that's not really true, is it, from a correlation? But what if using biometrics, what if using these wearable information, you can start to identify when are you most focused? When should you be doing your research? When should you be working on your biggest assignment? Maybe it's mornings. So from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., you work on your biggest and most important task. No distractions, no emails, no meetings, nothing. You just do that. And your biometric information also tells you at 2 to 3 p.m., you're feeling sluggish. Right? You had your lunch, you had a little bit of coffee, but it really didn't help. Your focus is all over the place, and you're thinking about something else. Well, your personalized biometric guidance can actually say, why don't you go take a walk or go exercise? So you go hit the gym for an hour, you come back feeling refreshed, feeling focused, and ready to tackle your next set of assignments. Right? Optimization. Well, right now, what if I wanted to gauge your attention level? You look like you're paying attention, but are you really paying attention? I bet you I could actually quantify your attention level. Automation. How could we take all this information and automate? Well, you'd be surprised. Just try and actually survey what you're doing on your phone. I bet you a lot of those tasks that you're doing could be automated. Right? So if you have the data, you can start to identify kind of mundane things that really systems should be smart enough to kind of do on their own without your involvement. Risk mitigation. Have you ever thought about how wearables could potentially save lives? Well, really how? How could it actually deter crime? Well, that's interesting. How about reducing human error? Could that be possible? Yes. Centralized communication. How could wearables play a pivotal function in centralizing all your communication needs? All right. So at this point, you should have a long list of ideal candidates. And you're thinking, okay, now what do I do with this? Well, this is where we get into ideal screening. You have a formal set of criteria that you rationalize against. So for example, how will this particular idea be better suited or be solved more elegantly through wearables, for instance? How could it reduce friction? And then asking more interesting questions. How does this align to your mission statement or your core competency or even your values, for instance? Is this an economically viable thing to pursue? And one of the questions that we sometimes don't ask hard enough is the scope too big? Should we be looking at a smaller slice of the overall solution that's more realistic? And here's the first example that I'm going to cover. So what this is basically using that ideal creation framework. We have identified the special characteristics of wearables in the case of monitoring, right? As well as the sector of health and then the use case of dehydration. So according to Institute of Medicine, you have to drink 10 cups of water per day. Who drinks 10 cups of water per day? I don't. But apparently, we're actually chronically dehydrated. So I'm feeling actually very dehydrated and thirsty. Well, seriously, but the reality is there are actually professions or activities where actually they could lead to severe dehydration, such as somebody who's working outside, like a construction or a farmer who's exposed to hours of sun. And certainly that goes for athletes as well as kids. So how could electrodermal response sensor that could detect your hydration or your sweat level could, early on detect that, hey, you've kind of gone beyond that, recommended hydration level. It's time to drink some water. Not Coke, by the way. The sugar substitute is cancerous. All right. Similarly, using your ideal framework, you determine that, hey, we could actually apply wearables to stress, anxiety, maybe even depression. Really? How? How do you do that? Well, first, a few stats. According to the American Psychology Association, as well as American Institute of Stress, 70% of people are impacted somehow physically in terms of symptoms from stress. And this could be headache, and I'm sure all of you have experienced that. It could be difficulty breathing. It could be tense muscles. Right? And the 73% experience psychological symptoms. And this could be in the form of anxiety, worry, helplessness. We may not admit it, but the reality is it's true. Why? We can see it. Just go out on the street on a Friday, Saturday night. What are they doing? They're drinking coffee, smoking, drinking alcohol, taking medication to cope with stress. And I think all of you being in this program are probably highly stressed. Well, what if we can use the proactive biometric monitoring to mitigate some of the stress level so that before it reaches a certain height where it becomes unmanageable, it starts to de-escalate. So it actually suggests that go walk around the block, go exercise, go talk to a friend, write in a journal, do something to de-escalate and lower that stress level. And then for something more severe, chronic, such as a depression, what if there is a clinical application that can actually recommend that you take your doctor-approved medication before the next major big onset? All right, the next example, I kind of talked a little bit about it, and I'm sure you'll appreciate it again, is each day we have to switch between tablet, laptop, phone. Laptop, tablet, phone. And I hate the fact that when I travel, I have to carry all these things and multiple phones. It's absolutely ridiculous, and frankly, it's just not a sustainable solution. So let me just pause here for a second. Now, I'm not making a statement saying that wearables should converge into a single device. That's not what I'm saying. Because wearables will always be fragmented. Wearables, by the definition, will be all over our bodies and our clothing. Okay. What I am, however, saying is that using augmented reality, like I was saying before, there is an opportunity to potentially do productivity, entertainment, gaming, social media, and all these things in the ambient air. Why be constrained to a form factor, whether it's a watch or Google Glass or whatever it is? Literally. It could be also 3D holographic. Consumer research. Love this area. Okay. You guys are scientists. You're social scientists, you're business scientists. What are you doing most of the time? You're trying to quantify things. Quantifying social media. Quantifying Internet of Things. Well, the problem is, researchers such as J.D. Power are limited in their tools. They use a survey research-based approach to do things like measure satisfaction around a particular brand or a product. Well, it's great to know that Marriott ranked number 1 and has a score of 707, but how do they know how I feel? How do they know what my experience is like when I enter Marriott, when I check in, when I go to my room, when I shower, when I eat at the restaurant? They don't know how I feel, what my state of being is. So there is an opportunity to use wearables to quantify your emotional and physical state in ways that's never been done before and integrated into consumer research and other ways. All right, let's change gears to talk about Internet of Things. You guys are probably thinking, all right, Scott, this is why I'm here. All right, so what are Internet of Things? Let's make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, these are essentially connected objects that have the ability to communicate over a multimodal network without human human to human or human to computer involvement. So essentially it's machine to machine. Now, one of the things that I would caution is most researchers will exclude out things like laptops, tablets, and smartphones from that definition. Now, if you read anything about IoT, you know that this is just incredible. I mean, 99% of the things in the world are not connected. That bottle that he's drinking from, that pen that you're using, the notepad that you're using, right, your glasses that you're wearing, none of these are connected. That sounds a little scary. I tell some of these things to my kids. My daughter says, "That is kind of spooky. Gives me the chills." But honestly, you have big firms like Intel, Google, Apple, Samsung, that's just chomping at the bits and saying, what are the opportunities in Internet of Things? How do we exploit this thing? Because we think this is where computing is going, where this is where the new opportunity is. Well, if you're like anything like me, it's so difficult to put your arms around this thing because, yes, you kind of understand what it means, but how do you start to like deconstruct what those opportunities are? Well, here's a fairly easy, understandable framework that helps you to logically put things together in a fashion that helps you to start thinking about what are those possibilities. So let's talk about monitoring continuously. So again, imagine that these sensor nodes are integrated on or integrated into objects. It means that it can actually start to detect movement, it can detect vibration, it can detect smoke, you can detect pressure. There's a number of things. And these sensors could be applied to on a massive scale to transportation, to building structures, to infrastructure like subways and trains and bridges, you name it. I mean, it's just incredible, all over your home. Now, one thing that I wasn't going to say in this presentation, but I'm going to mention anyways, is that in order for IoT to really be realized in terms of those projections that Cisco and everybody else has out there, is it needs to be adopted at a regulatory level. And I'll repeat myself. In order for IoT to be truly embraced at that large scale, it needs to be pushed at the regulatory level. In other words, if you've ever heard of LEED, which is a standard around how you build renewable buildings, so they have platinum, silver, gold standards, meaning when you construct a new building, how is it actually recycling the old material from the previous building? How is it environmentally conserving the energy or allowing flow of air and so forth? Well, I'm saying that if you actually incorporate into frameworks at the regulatory or at the law or at the code level, where it mandates the use of or incorporation of IoT, then you're going to have huge, huge wins. And so that's something that needs to be done at an industry council level. Data analysis. Well, all this monitoring is going to generate mounds of data. And according to Cisco, I think they're expecting some 16 exabytes of data per month by 2018. That's massive. I mean, can you imagine the sophisticated statistical analysis, the data analysis you can start to build, look for patterns and thresholds, and the predictive models they can build, essentially machine learning types of constructs, that can really start to help you identify really actionable insights that you can obtain from some of these big data. Again, that's a huge opportunity, and that's where a lot of companies like IBM are focusing on. Optimization. All this data has to translate into something. It has to translate into optimization and efficiency. So imagine if you're operating a skyscraper or a set of apartments. Can you imagine at that scale the electricity, the water usage, the sewer? I mean, there's so much opportunity to think about that. And I'll give you a few examples around optimization that I'm really excited about. Communication. Objects that didn't have a voice before will start to communicate. And this sounds a little scary, and I'm not sure if I necessarily want my refrigerator talking to my oven. But, whether we like it or not, that's the direction that we're going, where potentially these things, appliances inside our home, things around our house and outside, are going to start to communicate with one another as well as with wearables. Okay? And then at a larger scale, that's referring to really the wireless sensor network, which I talk about in one of my articles. Automation. Great. Well, the thing is, these sensor nodes are not just for tracking purposes. They're actually smart. they can actually execute tasks. So it used to be that, if I was a utility company, I would have to send my employees out to check the electric usage or the water usage. Well, now with smart meters, that's not the case. I can do all that remotely. Same thing with smart sensor inside the home, such as a smart thermostat. It's smart enough to know when I'm home to, make the temperature comfortable for me, but when I'm away, that it's going to conserve that energy so that it's not wasting unnecessary electricity. Right? All of this leads to great opportunities for cost minimization. Because at the end of the day, IoT is really about two major areas: optimization, cost minimization. Workflow. When you have all this intelligence, when you have the ability to self-regulate tasks and the ability to communicate with one another, it allows for orchestration of different systems and workflows based on business rules and logic. So it means that things will just happen. So let's say you're driving and you're basically a block away from your home. Well, your home senses that you're about to arrive home, so the garage door opens. The door entry to the inside unlocks. And that beer that you love so much gets dispensed from the refrigerator. It's playing the music that you like very much. Right? So all of these things just get kicked off. So you just kind of walk through, you don't even notice the things that's happening. But all of this is working in orchestration. Okay. So for example, I'm going to actually give you a warning here, which is in the IoT space, some of these concepts are going to be audacious, big, hairy, audacious goals, which means that it's going to require enterprise-scale implementation. It's going to potentially require a brand new ecosystem, new set of hardwares, new set of software technology, new service layers, new system integration, potentially entire data warehousing via architecture to support the business analytics and all the other infrastructure investments that's needed. So it's not trivial. So when you talk about IoT, it's very important that you do look at the big picture, but you focus on something specific within that big picture. So here's the big picture, and then think about what could be interesting for you. So when you make purchases at a store, such as these types of household goods, retailers and manufacturers know what's happening with those products up to the point of sale. Once you take it home, they have no visibility. They don't know how you're using it, how fast you're using it. They don't have any of that information. But they do make some assumptions around the velocity of consumption as well as the replenishment rates into their planning model. But the problem, of course, is that it's fairly crude. It really doesn't support their desire of truly wanting to have end-to-end demand supply network. Because really what the retailers and manufacturers want is they don't want to have to manufacture that extra bottle or whatnot until it's absolutely needed, because they don't want their cash sitting in inventory or in transport. So what if, again, this is where audacious ideas come in. What if in the future, very, very, very low-cost sensors get integrated into some of these containers or bottles? So when you purchase it and you take it home, you can actually sense your consumption rate. And just before it runs out, it actually sends or transmits that data to the product manufacturer so they can ready their production. So what that means is you're starting to really tightly align the production, the restocking, with true real-time demand. And when you think about that on a regional level and a domestic level, I mean, that could translate into pretty big profit margin improvements. Okay. You're probably going to kill me for this one. Visual merchandising. You guys all shop. You guys go to stores, right? And you see that they put a lot of thought around how they place their products and the position of those products in stores. And these retailers and grocers are just pouring over sales data at the product category level, product item level, because they want to make sure that from an inventory, they're optimizing it, and also from a product placement inside the store, that it's really maximizing the per square feet of sales, so that whatever their retail space is, they're getting the most out of their buck. Now imagine, given the fact that a lot of that whole process, there's a lag of potentially weeks, if not months, because they have to actually pour through historical data, crunch that data, and then convert that into visual merchandising fine-tuning. But what if there's this opportunity to utilize IoT to create something called morphing merchandising system. Crazy, right? What does that mean? I don't know where these ideas come from. It comes from my idea framework. Imagine this display unit is actually equipped with a motor, has wheels. And no, it's not a robot, but effectively it is. So when sales data is getting aggregated into that data warehouse, data mart, it's actually optimizing. It's saying, okay, for this store versus, let's say, a store 10 miles away, or kilometers away, I should say, how could we potentially reconfigure this next, based on today's data? How could we potentially fine-tune it for tomorrow, given the fact that tomorrow's a weekend versus today's a weekday, as an example? Now let's take it to grocers. When you go to a grocery store, they have these large shelves, right? Well, imagine that these shelves have similar capabilities, but also the shelving system could be completely overhauled, where they can be shifted down, shifted up. So what that means is that products that tend to sell better gets a higher position, and things that don't sell gets pushed down, perhaps. Or maybe a product that you like to feature. So, all of these ideas are just borderline crazy. That's the whole point of idea creation, is that they're audacious. Because it's going to require an entire new ecosystem. And no one person or company can tackle all of it. You can only choose to look at a very specific piece, whether it's a service layer, whether it's an app layer, whether it's a hardware, and really think about, where could this potentially go? But it's a very interesting notion, isn't it, though? Okay, citywide traffic. Your GPS navigational system is really concerned about the fact that you're traveling from point A to point B, and it wants to do it in the least amount of time. It is not concerned about citywide traffic optimization. Now, with Internet of Things and connected cars, and more importantly, driverless cars, where it could become ubiquitous in the future, there is this opportunity for optimizing traffic. Now, I will caution that as long as people are driving, because people tend to act and make decisions based on self-interest, they may not necessarily align with the greater good of citywide optimization. All right, my last example. Okay, so this combines wearables, Internet of Things, monitoring, automation, workflow, all of these things. Really interesting stuff. So if you've ever read stories about crime, you know that typically what happens is that by the time somebody makes a call, it's too late. That person's already been robbed, that person's already hurt. What if there is a way to combine wearables where a device, whether it's a watch or a wristband, just by simply just touching it or spoken word activates kicks off a series of workflow. So for example, the CCTVs. Right now, in today's world, CCTVs are analog. A lot of them are really not internet capable, nor do they employ any type of computer vision that can systematically detect criminal behavior. So very dumb for all purposes. But what if you could actually equip some with IP, and these CCTVs, based on the activation, can actually pivot to the crime scene. And you also install, let's say, floodlights, LED floodlights. So the lights come on, let's say it's at nighttime, for instance. And a pre-recorded message over the loudspeaker says, "You're being recorded," and the police has been dispatched. Okay? In parallel, that signal goes to the local police station. Because right now what happens is when you call emergency services, it has to go through layers and layers before it actually goes to the local office, at which point, at least in the US, you could be placed on hold. Thank you for holding. Which is ridiculous because you're in an emergency state, right? But imagine that message goes right to the local police station, and more importantly, aside from the police officer being dispatched, they can actually get a live feed of the crime in progress. So again, many opportunities around hardware, software, but even the service layer. But imagine, the fact that you can actually stream live video, but also even the biometrics of the victim, so you know how that person feels. All right, so I know we covered a lot of territory in a short period of time, and thank you for your attention level. Thank you for staying awake with me. So I hope that some of these frameworks and guidelines have been helpful to to help you kind of think through and spur critical thinking and creative idea creation, and ultimately, to help you to create the next $1 billion business opportunity. Okay, thank you.